Are you tired of playing on the same boring map? Staring at those pixel-perfect coastlines, knowing every single mountain, valley, and misplaced river like the back of your sword hand? I mean, honestly, would you rather play as this guy? Or this guy? Want a world that actually feels alive? A place where you get to decide which empire gets that totally unnecessary desert, or the mountain range nobody asked for, or the river that goes back and forth in switchbacks for all of eternity. Then I've got news for you. You too can make characters that look like this, or design maps with deep world building like this.
Armpit.
Don't just take my word for it. Look at these Steam reviews. And these happy users on the active Discord, and these developer responses demonstrating the stability of the alpha version that you get to use, and the fact that it is evergreen and could never get broken by new DLC or updates to the game. That's right, realistic worlds, with so much conlanging. It oozes out even when you don't want it. And a map generator that looks like it was made by a 5-year-old, with an underlying codebase for the procedural map generator that looks like the product of 10,000 monkeys sitting at their typewriters. But if you still want to generate a map, even after all those warnings, here is an overly long tutorial for you from a guy with a crappy microphone. CK3 RPG. Can you tell us what the first step is?
The first step you're going to need to take is to install Gimp. It is a free open source image editor, and it is essential for processing your map files later. You can get it from gimp.org. The link is up here in the descriptions. And this is, again, one of those non-negotiable steps. Get it installed and we are good to go.
So you're saying if people fail to follow all the steps, they won't complete their maps?
That's exactly right. If you fail to follow any of these steps, you will not complete your map.
Your next step is to subscribe to the Procedural Map Generator Project in its current form. You can find this on the Steam Workshop or Paradox Mods.
And what is the current form of the project?
Well, the current form of the project will vary. The form as I'm taking this video is alpha 0.20.0, and that is the Roads to Power update. Again, that's alpha 0.20.0, the Roads to Power update. You will find that on the Steam Workshop and on Paradox Mods.
Step 3, let's create your mod. To do this, open up the Crusader Kings 3 launcher. Click the All Installed Mods button. Now select Upload Mod. Now you might be thinking, I don't want to upload a mod. Don't worry, we're not uploading anything yet. Click Create a Mod and you're going to fill in the name, version, and directory. So test mod 0.1 and whatever the directory name, the file folder that you want to be working in. I'm just going to call it test mod as well. Pro tip here, avoid using special characters, accents in the mod name or directory. That is a quick way to break things, and we definitely do not want that. You can click some tabs, doesn't really matter. Click Map, and then click Create Mod. Your mod has been created and should now be in the list of mods. Great! And once you've done that, it will bring you to this screen. It's giving you the opportunity to upload your empty and boring mod to the workshop or to Paradox. Don't do it. That would be a waste. Alright, with your mod folder created, you are going to want to open it up. You can find it in Documents, Paradox Interactive, /Crusader Kings 3 /mod. And it will be listed by the directory name you added when you were trying to create the mod. So here you can see I'm in my Documents folder. I've gone through to the Crusader Kings 3 folder, the mod folder, and I had a folder named Test Mod. Inside of it, I have this lonely descriptor. Now you're going to want to open up a separate window and go to the folder where the Procedural Map Generator downloaded. For me, that is in my Drive and Steam library, Steam Apps, Workshop, Content, and then there's a number for the Crusader Kings 3 game, and each mod will have an individually assigned number for it. Just look for the last modified one, assuming you just modified the generator, and it should be the one up top. Now you'll see here my file folder looks a little bit different than what you'll be working with. I'm not working off of the Steam version because subscribing to your own mod off of Steam really messes things up down the road. So here I'll be working from the local mod folder for the Noiselandia version of the template. But again, you want to be getting this from Steam or from Paradox Mods and then bringing it over. The next thing you're going to want to do once you open it up is to copy all of these contents, everything from the mod folder in your Steam Workshop or your Paradox Mods folder. Copy all of these files, and you're going to place those files in your newly created mod folder. So for me, I would copy all the files here from Noiselandia, and I would place those over into my test mod folder. Alright, so here we are, we're copying everything over to the test mod folder, and we're getting this message, do we want to replace descriptor.mod? And you are going to click yes, replace the file in this destination. Alright, now you want to open up the descriptor.mod file in your text editor of choice. Here I chose Notepad++, it really does not matter. At the top you'll see that the name is still showing Noiselandia, change it to whatever you want it to be, so test mod. At the bottom you'll see a remote ID. The remote ID, remote file ID, is telling Steam, is telling Crusader Kings what Steam mod is this, what remote file is it. So if you keep that remote file ID, you're always going to get Noiselandia because it is going to, instead of sending it to your mod, it will send it to Noiselandia. So delete that remote file ID. And at that point you can save all of your edits and close out. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, this is about generating a new world for Crusader Kings 3. When are we ever going to do that? Well, before we do, just one more step. I need you to go into your settings for your browser and change the download settings to download any of the files that you're going to generate out of the generator to a folder called Replacers, which is in your mod. Ding, 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 ding. Here is the Replacers folder. Again, you are going to make sure that your browser is set to download all of the files to the Replacers folder. If you do not do this, you will likely fail to create a map because you are going to lose track of the files in your downloads folder. You're not going to be able to do them manually right. You'll try to move things over. You'll get multiple files with the same names. It is a huge headache. And every time that somebody has tried to do that, I've seen them fail. So again, change your downloads to the Replacers folder. Alright, we're finally done with all of the pre-setup. I assure you that it will be easier the next time that you do it. It is like old hand for me. And generally you can just reuse some of the same file folder structures that you've used before if you want to create a new map and override some of those files. So every time you do it, it'll get easier. But we are finally to the point that we can get into the browser and start working with the procedural map generator. So you'll just navigate over to ck2rpg.github.io/generator. Again, that's ck2rpg.github.io/generator. You'll see there is a link to the written tutorial, which is on the Discord. There's a button to generate a new world, and I give updates on each release here on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, I say, don't expect much, this is an alpha. Click Generate a New World, and you'll see this little loading screen, and in just a second or two you'll get this low-res generated map. You'll see a toolbar up in the top left corner, map modes down in the bottom right corner, a zoom in, zoom out button, wrap button up here in the top right, and also just a random map or random new world button here in the top right. This is to generate a noise-based map. Up here in the top left, the toolbar is really the heart of where your work will be. So let's take a look at some of the functionalities of the toolbar. see tabs. You can click through for various options. Up at the top left is what I call the Mass Effect tab, which is the Mass tab. And some of these are effects that will apply broad changes across the map. You have things like dropping all of your cells to ocean, spreading elevation out. One of the ways that the generator works is by basically setting spread points or lines across the map from which elevation can spread out in a semi-random fashion and build up from a pre-randomized earlier elevation. So you could start out with multiple cells, say at between net elevation of negative 255 all the way up to 0, and spreading lines that go across the map, spreading points, and from that elevation, I'd colloquially call it magma, but it just spreads out from there. And you can see here when I click create a new map, generate a new world, that you'll see that same effect going on. And you can kind of see the vestiges of how this spreading process works by looking at the elevation of the water, right? You have these areas where the land is building up, and from that spreading out. Now again, if I click the spread elevation from spreading centers button, you can see that again in action. See how the land is building up, and it seems to be from certain points. You get the mountains starting to develop, mostly in the middle areas of these continents or islands. You also have the option to soften that elevation and spread it out. And you might think, well, it looks better. Let me just show you what this looks like, right? You're softening it. We'll just clean that up a little bit. If you see something that starts to look weird, press the clean button. There you go. It's going to make the map look good again. So softening the elevation and spreading it out, it might look a little bit muted to you, or a little bit like there's too little noise. It actually looks a little bit better sometimes in game when you do this. So again, that's the soften function. That might not be the main thing that you work with, though. It's one of the original approaches that I used when I was first creating the generator, but it's a little bit of a slower approach when you get to larger map sizes and larger resolutions, increased resolution. There's also a button to increase elevation everywhere, and again, this is just increasing the elevation of every cell on the map by 1, decreasing the elevation of every map on the cell by 1, or by whatever adjustment level you give down here. And you'll see here you'll have just a few more options that will apply across the map, and they're pretty self-explanatory if you look at the tooltips. You can raise the elevation of mountains, lower the elevation of mountains, raise the elevation only of land, lower the elevation only of water. There's just a few more buttons here. Some of them probably won't be long for the generator. We might get rid of them soon, but you can raise the elevation of mountains only, lower the elevation of mountains, raise the elevation of land only, lower the elevation of water only. Everything really, again, self-explanatory using the tooltips. You can move all elevation across the map to sea level, or raise the elevation of all water across the map to right there at the sea level. If you click on brush, you're going to see several more options. You have the ability to raise the elevation, lower the elevation, erode terrain, or erase provinces here. So if you click on the raise elevation brush, this does exactly what you would expect. If I move over, you see the red indicator of where my cursor is on the map. And if I drag that now across the map, you're going to get raised elevation. Now, you're not seeing much there, right? Look over here. The brush size right now is set at 30. I could drop that down to 5 if I wanted to, and you'll see I get a smaller cursor. And it's going to indicate where it's going to be. But let's keep it at 30, but let's switch the brush power. That is the amount of elevation that you want to raise with a click. And we're gonna change that to 10. Little goes a long way here because it is registering your mouse clicks, and it can register a good bit of them at once. But now you'll see as I click here, Elevation is starting to rise, elevation is starting to rise, and even more elevation. What if I do, instead of 10, let's do 50, right? Wow, there you go, going up to mountains very quickly, right? You can do an upper limit, and that is the maximum amount of elevation you will raise it to. So let's say if I did 45, you'll see now, even though my power is set to 50, it's going to stop once it gets to 45. You can set a lower limit, that is a maximum or minimum elevation beyond which it will not lower the elevation, and that's once you click the lower brush over here. Again, I'm going to go over the same area, and you see it is getting uniformly down to 10 elevation. One more thing here with raising and lowering elevation, you can click the absolute button, and when you click absolute, whatever your brush power is, that is going to be what your elevation is. So if I do raise elevation with an absolute set and my brush power is set to 50, everything it touches is going to be set to 50. And we're just going to click clean up isolated cells here so you can kind of see it in progress. I'm going to turn off the absolute brush power. There's a couple more things on the screen. You see the erode brush. Now when I go over with the erode brush and I hit it up against mountains, you can kind of see, oh wow, that did a lot, right? Looks like the power is set way too high. Let's just set it to 2. A little bit of erode goes a long way. You can see it start to eat away at the mountains. You can set it even lower, set it to 1, and watch as it erodes out. This is a really simple approach to erosion. It's basically just kind of tearing down the mountains and spreading them out. Tearing down elevation and spreading it out. Once you've run it, you probably want to click clean up cells just so you can see a better look at what the map might look like, end up looking like. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, what about this select color here? What is that? Well, it's a terrain selector, and you can kind of see sea level, plains, desert, taiga, mountains, hills. That's going to let us draw terrain later. And then the other brush here, the color right here will be a color selector for various map painting modes. So we're going to have the option to draw cultures, draw religions, faiths, draw titles on your map, and that's going to be what you use to select a color for that. Several new. On the map tab, you'll see just a few options. So one, map size. How big do you want your generated map to be? That's the ultimate size of your map as it's going to be shown in the game. The vanilla map is 8,192 by 4,096 pixels. Generally, we're keeping it in these, we're basically just keeping it close to the vanilla ratio or at vanilla ratio right now. We're doing some experiments to see if we can add some other sizes, but there are some known bugs that occur when your aspect ratio doesn't quite match what it should be. So here we've got 4 different sizes from very small maps to vanilla size maps. Now you might be asking, well, what's resolution? Resolution is basically how the generator is drawing your map. So at 512 by 256, which is what it's set to originally, the generator is generating 512 by 256 cells. And from those cells, it is drawing out your vanilla size map. How does it do that? Well, if the elevation at cell 00 is 100, then the generator will draw out that map across 16 pixels, right? 16 by 16 square that is all at 100 elevation. So it'll be this blockier approach like you see right here, right? This low res approach where there are kind of these larger swaths or larger blocks of terrain, larger blocks of elevation. And then later on, after we generate, when we're working on the Gimp script, which I'll introduce in a little bit, the Gimp script is going to take those low-res maps and it applies a Gaussian blur to them which basically gives you a non-Minecraft looking map, which is nice once you're in the game, that you don't have these giant blocks in the map, in the map. Now, why would you use the lower resolution? For some people, their computers just can't handle the higher resolution, and so this is the only performant way that they can do it. And for other people, it's just an easier, quicker generation. Me, personally, I prefer to generate at the 4096 by 2048 and make the resolution match the map size. And you'll see when I do this, it's going to generate this new map. And it might take just a second, and it's going to be a noise-based map. Let's see here. We'll give it just a second to go ahead and generate. There you go. So here is the noise-based map. It's 4096 by 4096, or 4096 by 2048 with a resolution of 4096 by 2048. And you can see immediately the difference, right? The brush looks smaller because the pixels aren't covering as much ground. It doesn't look as pixelated. We're not going to have to apply that same type of blur. So what you do here in the generator will be one-to-one to what you're getting in the map, versus with those lower pixels, you're going to see that blur process occur. Again, why would people choose to go smaller or to not do the full map size or to do a lower resolution? Quicker to make the map, and it's also quicker to use the generator. Some of the features start to get a little bit laggier the higher you go. But here, 4096, this half vanilla size, I think is really good. It works really well. Never too laggy. You can see here I'm just scrolling around, making some elevation changes, and it's not causing any troubles. Now, so we've talked about map size, we've talked about resolution. We also have this elevation to height map divider. What does it do? Well, the generator is based on this idea, this land elevation that ranges from 37 to 510. Now you may be thinking 37 to 510, how are you converting that? Well, by default, and you can't go below this in the generator, the generator will divide whatever that elevation is by 2. So if it's 510, it gets divided down to 255. And what am I talking about with 255? Well, on your grayscale map, what does the color look like, right? So color will go from 0 to 255. So if it's 510 elevation, it's going to get divided down to 255. If I were to import the vanilla map into the vanilla height map into the generator, and I wanted to generate something similar to the way that vanilla approaches elevation, divide it by about 5. And it's going to be really kind of hit or miss trying to figure out exactly what you want to do on that divider. If the lower the number is, the more stark your terrain is going to look. The higher the number is, the more your terrain is going to look squished down like vanilla is. So now we'll take a look at the climate tab. Under the climate tab, you'll see the equator, tropical limit, subtropical limit, temperate limit, and then cold will be what's ever beyond the temperate limit. Now, what do we mean by equator? What do the limits mean? So the equator is basically, you're setting that line from the top of the canvas, so from the top of your browser screen. How many pixels down will the equator be? Now, reminding you that we're using this half vanilla size map, right? So we have a 4096 by 2048 map. So I would probably want the equator to be somewhere in the middle, right? So I'll say 1024. Now, when you do that, you'll see this dark line indicating where the equator is. And then every limit that you set will just be how many pixels from the equator, both directions, should that climate zone go. So if I say 100 for the tropical zone, you'll immediately see this change, and the tropical zone is limited to 100 pixels with some variation, random variation, to make sure it doesn't just look like a straight line across. Subtropical zone, again, I'm going to say 400 pixels. And that's not 400 pixels from the top of the tropical zone. That is, again, 400 pixels from the top of the equator, or from the equator, rather, in both directions. And then for temperate, let's say 1500. Now, 1500 didn't do anything, right? Well, we set it too far. Because again, the equator is at 1024. We're saying how many pixels from the equator should it be? Instead of doing that, let's say 900. And when you do 900, you see here cold zones where you'll get some taiga, both on the south and the north side of the map. So I enjoy using the editor functions here of the generator, but many of you will want to import a height map. To do that, you're going to click on this Import tab, and you'll see a few different options here, and then a button you can click to select which file you want to import for your height map. But let's go over these options real fast. You have a divider, so you're going to import a height map. It's going to be based on a grayscale from 0 to 255, right? The divider, imported divider, will divide each cell by whatever the number is. So here, let's say we put 5, and you have a cell on your height map that is at level 200. Well, that's going to be converted over to 40, right? So 200 divided by 5, you'll get 40. If you have a multiplier here, let's say, and your map has a scale of 0 to 255, you have a cell that is at 10, you do a multiplier of 5, well, you've got a new elevation of 50 when that's imported. And if it goes over 255, it'll just drop it down to 255. So you'll end up having a map that's scaled or squished down or pulled up however you need to. And why is that important? Well, we don't know what you're going to be importing, right? We don't know what those elevation levels are going to mean from the grayscale that you're using. You might be importing a map from Tangrams, you might be importing a map from just a real-world height map. And so using these, you'll be able to figure out exactly where it needs to be to make sure that that sea level is right, to make sure that you're getting the right mix of mountains, plains, and everything else. And you also have just an adjuster, so this can be positive or negative, and it will just adjust each cell by the amount that you put there. One good way to test this is to keep a low-res map. So you can do a, if you go back up to your map options, you could do a resolution of 512 by 256. And then using that, you can test for each height map that you're importing what's a good mix of those options that you can use in order to get the height map to look like you want it to look. Here I'm going to use a multiplier of 5, and I'm just going to import the vanilla height map. You'll see here, and I just click on it, open, and then it's going to start importing, and it'll take just a second for the import to complete. There you go. Now once it does, you'll see the height map imported in, and it's going to be imported. It'll switch over to the height map mode, which here you'll see on the bottom. You can click it in the map mode. We're going to switch back over to the pixel map just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. Now you'll see some mountains, you'll see jungle, desert, temperate, all that climate that we selected before. Here, if you're looking for something more real world, you're going to want to move the equator down. You're going to want to change some of the limits of tropical, subtropical, and temperate. But we're not going to bother with that right now because we're just working through generator options here. So why did I use 5 here? Well, I'm just familiar with the vanilla map, and I'm familiar with how that height map is mapped over. And even then, you're going to see maybe some things that don't quite make sense. I mean, look over here. You've got some land where it shouldn't be. You've got some connecting areas of land where they shouldn't exist. You might just have to do some quick edits to make it look exactly right, or you can just do some adjustments the next time you import. So you could do a multiplier of 5, and then you could adjust it down by 4 or 5 and see if that fixes it. And that's a good way to work through the height map. Again, is just using that low res map first, figuring out if it works, and then you can do the higher resolutions. Alright, now let's take a look at the Features tab. The Features tab allows you to set some granular limits for different types of terrain, for different levels of elevation, for the way that noise works, and for the way that rivers work. So the rivers slider here, from low to high, what the river slider does is it will decrease the amount of distance, or decrease the distance between 2 points from which a river can spawn. So if it's higher, more rivers can spawn. The distance that the generator uses to determine whether a river can spawn will be lower. So you can have more rivers throughout the map. If it's lower, there will be a higher distance between the 2 points where a river can spawn. You will have less rivers throughout the map. These elevation limits here for hills, mountain, and snowline, that means if, again, the elevations used in the generator are between basically -510 and 510. Those elevations are converted over once we're trying to do it down to a height map. But if the elevation is above the limit here, so for the hills, if it's above 205, then that terrain will become hills until it hits the mountain elevation, here 255, and then that terrain will become mountain, and then once it hits the snowline elevation, basically you're going to have a snow-capped peak of the mountain. So you can increase these, decrease these, just make sure you know that you're still keeping some range between hills and mountains, you're still keeping some range between mountains and snowline. And then you have the farmland max elevation, so when the generator reaches that elevation, you won't have farmlands produce anymore, and here farmlands are set to 65. You have the wetlands max elevation, again, by default set to 65. So basically, farmlands and wetlands are set through noise and simplex noise, and we don't want them all over the map. You don't want them where there should be up in the mountains or elsewhere necessarily, at least by default. And so we have it set to where they're just generally around coastal areas. And if you think our elevation, our coastal areas for our elevation is 37. Below that is the ocean or sea, lake, whatever. So you have this small range right there along the coast, generally where you can have farmlands or wetlands developing. Here you have the chunk size and whether it's scattershot. So the chunk size is basically when the noise function is applied to the map, on what scale is it applied? Is it a 16 pixel chunk, right? So you'll have this noisy area of around 16 pixels, or is it something lower, so you have these smaller areas of noise? Or is it something higher, where you have these larger areas of noise across the map? And if we click over, there's a terrain map mode. You'll actually be able to see this in process. We're going to let it load up here, and I'm going to decrease the resolution in a second, so we'll get some faster loading. Okay, so here I've just decreased the resolution to create a new map, so you can see and I'll do a new random map so you can see some of this in process. So again, this chunk size, how large is the chunk? If we set it to, say, 50, that's going to change the way that the noise looks for the farmland. If we set it to 150, again, you're going to see kind of a chunkier farmlands. If we set it to 500, even chunkier. And then how scattershot? Is it going to be kind of spread out, so that noise is kind of spread out along an area around the selected target area for the noise, or is it just exactly where it is? So what does that mean? Well, let's click on 1 and you'll see, or 500. It's spread out even more. And you don't see this as much, I guess, in this lower resolution map. So I'm gonna up the resolution and see if you're able to see it a little bit better. All right, so you have a higher resolution map here. Let's go to terrain mode. Okay, and you see farmland is the red right there along the coast. Now if we go back over to features and let's set, we're going to increase the farmland elevation so you can see this even better. To 150. Okay, so if you have a 500 chunk size with 150 max elevation, you can see it's pretty much taken up everything, right? Those chunks are eating up everything. But if you decrease that to 1, and you give that a really good scatter shot, right? It's going all over the place. If you make the scatter shot 1, right, the chunk size is 1, the scatter shot is 1, it's more cohesive. Go to 15. Now you're starting to get even more scattered. And let's, again, we're going to just make the chunk size 16. We're going to make the scatter shot 1. And we're going to take that, now you see just a complete chunk with no scattering really, or very little scattering. And it looks very uniform, the farmland there. Now I'm going to go ahead and increase the scatter shot so you can see how it gets less uniform. There you go. Same thing with wetlands, and here I'm going to drop down the farmland max elevation so we don't see it anymore. And now you see those wetlands are those little greenish blue areas along the coast. And we're going to go ahead and increase the max elevation, or leave the max elevation, but we're going to do, again, a scatter shot of 1 just to show how it's this blockier, less scattered noise that's applied on a 16 pixel scale. Or you can take that scatter shot up to 16 pixels, and then that's kind of spread out up to 16 pixels, kind of away from the cell where the noise is targeted. And so that's the Features tab. It's just giving you some more granular controls over elevation limits for terrain, over your farmland and wetland, the way that those noise functions are applied. And I'm sure here in the future we'll have some more options to allow you to do things like setting impassable terrain to a certain limit, elevation limit, and then past that everything will be impassable terrain. That is on our list of development, so you might see that added to this menu soon. And other options that just give you kind of this broad control over the terrain generation. We're trying to make this as customizable as possible so that you can use these features to get your map to the place that you want it to be. Now here we have the Cultures tab. The Cultures tab here on the bottom gives you various options related to a culture. Basically, you can set whether you want to generate random appearances or ethnicities for a culture and assign it, or if you just want to apply vanilla ethnicities. So you could have a culture named Blaga, and Blaga might have French as its ethnicity, and so the French ethnicity would be applied and everybody would look like they're French, but the culture would be Blaga. It would have whatever traditions, innovations, everything that are applied to that culture. You can set whether the skin and hair and eye color should be vanilla or random. If you set it to random, you're going to get some interesting looks. Same thing if you set ethnicities to random, you might get some more cartoonish-like looks. We're hoping to add some more customizability to that in the near future, including with the Culture Painter and Editor, which will allow you to go in and quickly edit the ethnicity that's generated, and hopefully to be able to set some variation limits on different genes, and when you do that random generation. You also have this button to what level do you want to generate an initial seed culture for every title, and then diverging cultures from that culture will have the same heritage. So here it's set to empire, so imagine you'll have an empire, a culture that's set at the empire level with a certain heritage, and then every culture that diverges out from there will be at the kingdom level. Each kingdom will have a culture, and it'll be a child of the generated empire culture or heritage. You could set that lower. You could set that to the county level, right? Or you could just set it not to diverge at all, and you just have that single monoculture. If you set it at the duchy county level, you're going to have a lot of cultures generate, right? I mean, it can increase generation times for you. Generally, I would keep it at I keep it at the empire to the kingdom level, and that's what I do by default, just because then you have all these separate kingdoms with separate cultures. But feel free to do whatever you want here, and also with the culture painter, the culture editor, you're going to have a lot more options to be able to customize on your own and quickly where cultures will be applied. And then once you do that, these culture generations will only apply where you haven't specifically drawn a culture in. Similarly, with the Religions tab, you can set the religious families at the empire level or below, right? So you could set it at kingdom, duchy, county level, and then where do your faiths diverge? So if I set it to the kingdom level, I can set my faiths to diverge at the county level. And that means that for every instance of a title of kingdom level, an associated religion family will be generated. And that's, a family is the broad umbrella for all of the faiths that come out of it. So you'd have a religious family, and then you would have faiths, the faiths of the counties, the faiths of the individuals. They would be set at the duchy level. So you would have various faiths all at different duchies. Each duchy would have its own faith. And that's going to allow you to have multiple faiths that are across the map. Next we have the History tab. In the History tab you have a select box here to generate holders. And this is the level at which level and below titles will spawn holders in their history. So if I set it to random, you would have counts, you would have dukes, you would have kings in different places, you would have empires in other places, and it would just depend. It would randomly be generated. If I set it to empire level, every empire is going to have a holder at the start of the game. If I set it to kingdom level, you won't have emperors anywhere across the map at the start of the game. You'll just have kings, and every kingdom level title will have a holder, kingdom level and below. If you set it to duchy level again, every duchy across the map will have a duke at the start of the game, duke or duchess, but you won't have any kingdom level titles yet. You'll have de jure titles, but you won't have any actual holders for those titles yet, and you won't have any empires. And again, county level, the same thing. The era is just a broad-based, and at this point it is a uniform for everybody on the map. Are they going to start at tribal, early medieval, high medieval, or late medieval era, and which innovations will they have? So if you set early medieval, they're going to have all of the innovations up to early medieval. If you set tribal, they're basically going to be starting at the beginning of the tribal era. High medieval, you're going to have all of your tribal, early medieval innovations, and so on.
That brings us to two very exciting features that are being added in Alpha 0.20. The first one is the title, faith, and culture painters. So on the first map editing screen, you can click title map and it'll bring you up here. So say you're in the pixel mode, just click over on the title map. It'll bring you up here and you have your brush with brush colors that you can select through. Or you can press tab to change between brush colors. And then you can just draw titles onto the screen. So here we have an empire title, Modmamel, that's been drawn onto the screen. And if we want to draw kingdoms within that title, then we'd click on the right arrow. You press tab to switch over to a new color. And you can draw a kingdom, Bludoi. Another kingdom, Uberd. And again, you just click into that title, and then you can draw within each title. So here we're drawing our duchies, and I'm just pressing tab each time to change the colors here. So we've quickly drawn 3 duchies. And then we can draw counties. I'm going to make this brush a little bit smaller so we can draw some counties in here. And then you can click within a county and you can draw provinces. So very quickly, we've been able to draw 2 provinces within a county of Ardra, within the Duchy of Viati, of the Kingdom of Bludoi, and the Empire of Modmamel. Now, every province, you're drawing this in the hierarchical structure, right? Every province that you draw will get drawn onto your province map ultimately. If you don't end up filling in a kingdom, if you don't end up filling in a duchy, a county, an empire, then that part's going to be randomly generated, right? It's going to be like you never drew on that part of the map. But you have to get down to that province level so that the generator knows you have that full hierarchy. You have it from empire down to province within that hierarchy. So here, you're going to have the Empire of Madmanel with Bludoi, Viadi, Ardra, and Vradi and Brevo. Those are all going to be generated, right? Another important thing here, once you've drawn into these, you can actually click into these and you can change the name of the empire. So instead of Madmanel, which sounds kind of odd, we'll just call it Blue Empire, because world building, right? And then if you click in on the next one, Bludoi, Blue Empire, Bludoi, that actually makes sense. We'll keep that one. And you can do that on any of the different titles that you've drawn. You can also, if you want to continue to draw in that color, you can just click on that color swatch here. And then when I draw from there, it'll draw the same color. Let's say I draw a new empire color up here, the Northern Empire. I'm going to go ahead and switch that back over to a larger brush size. Whoa, that's a little bit too big. There we go. So I draw this Northern Empire. But then say I want to go ahead and fill in the Blue Empire. Well, I just click on the color swatch, and I can draw back over in that color. Now again, if I want to do a new color, a new empire color, I press tab again, it switches my color down here. I can just fill that in. And then whenever I want to edit the kingdoms of that empire, I've clicked into it, and then you can only draw within that empire. So say that I'm trying to draw a kingdom. I can't come over here. It's not going to draw anything, right? It won't draw anything in ocean, won't draw anything on the blank map. It'll only draw within that empire. So that is the title editor, the title painter, which you can use there before you've generated any provinces to try to predefine what some of your hierarchical titles will be and what some of your ultimate provinces will be. Let's say instead that you just want to draw a culture. Well, before we get there, one important thing to know about the title painter is that whatever you have set as your cultural and religious divergence levels, the title painter adheres to that. So here it's created multiple cultures that all correspond to the kingdom level, which is the culture, the level, title level at which a culture diverges. So when a kingdom is created in the title painter, it goes ahead and generates the corresponding culture for it. Similarly, if you have your religious families set at empire level, it's going to create religious families at the empire level, and it's going to set diverging faiths at the kingdom level. You can see that if you click on the faith map here, that for those kingdoms which we've went ahead and created, there are generated kingdoms, kingdom faiths here on the map. The next thing we're going to want to do, we're going to look if you don't want to create the titles, all you want to do is create the cultures or the faiths. Well, very easy. Again, there are two map modes here, culture or faith. Same thing with the brush. You can press tab to get to a new color, and then you just paint it in. Now, this entire area of the map will be of the deer culture. Again, you can click on that culture. It's editable, so you can change the ethos, you can change the graphics, you can change traditions that it has, its ethnicity, its martial customs, clothing. You can even change the language that it uses by clicking Generate Language, and it's going to click and generate entirely new word list, name list for you. Once you're satisfied with that, you just click the X button. That's going to save everything. And then you can click Tab to do another culture. We're going to do another culture up here on this island chain. Another culture here. Another culture here. Very easy to quickly draw in cultures, faiths, religions, whatever you want to do. Here we'll switch over to faiths. See? Cultures have been drawn, but faiths remain unaffected. I can press Tab to create a new color. And again, I can just click into that island chain and apply that faith. Now, every province, what does it mean when we're drawing culture and faith onto the map? Because we haven't generated provinces, right? So how do we know where that line is? Well, we don't know that exactly. We still have to generate the provinces. We still have to know where their locators are going to be. But the map generator will apply that color faith or that color culture to every single province whose locator lies within that color. So here, any province with a locator that lies, locator just being where that province, the graphics for that province appear on the map for the holding. Wherever that locator is, if it lies within that color, which is defined on the map, then it will be of that faith or of that culture. So even though we can't know exactly where those provinces are yet because they haven't been generated, we can still go ahead and apply faith culture broadly. Now the boundaries might not look exactly like what you see here because province boundaries aren't going to match up exactly to what your faith and your culture boundaries are, but generally it's going to take in broad swaths of area. And then at the borders, it's going to be a little bit different because of the boundaries and shapes of the provinces. So again, that lets you apply, it lets you paint your cultures, it lets you paint your faiths, it lets you paint your titles, and it lets you edit them all right here in the painter before you've even generated any provinces.
Okay, now we're going to go ahead and generate provinces, generate our province map. To do that, you click on the Titles tab. You'll see a button, Generate Provinces. You just click on that, and it will bring up this page telling you your provinces are generating, that it will generally take about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. As each element of province generation occurs, you'll see that item in the list go from red to green. The only thing that you might not see if you're using a larger map with high resolution, it might not go through the water body and continent process, but don't worry about that. It'll just skip right over it and it's no problem. Now what's going on here when we're doing province generation is basically the generator is looking for points on the map from which it can spread out a province. So you'll get all of these identified points on the map, and then those points will start to spread out. The color from that point of that province will start to spread out until it hits, if it's water, until it hits land, right? And it can't go over land. Or if it's land, until it either hits water or it hits another province. Same with water until it hits another province. When it does, it's blocked. It won't go any farther. And so you have this irregularly shaped province map that's generated. You can see here there's kind of squiggly on the edges province map, and that it'll be blocked out by the land and the water, where only water provinces generate on water, only land provinces generate on land. And it keeps attempting to do that. It keeps attempting to fill in the map kind of one step at a time, spreading these provinces out. Last worst case scenario, if it doesn't fill everything in, then it has a fill-in function, which will basically just bleed across the map. Rarely does it occur if you have normal settings in place, but you do see, and I'll point out here, kind of right here, this province, you see this little finger, I guess, sticking out towards another province, and that's just where it had to bleed out because it couldn't find a way to spread. Again, this is fairly rare, and it's not entirely common. When you look across the map, you're not going to see a ton of it, but it does occur at points, so don't be alarmed if you see that. So for file saving, I am going to click on Proceed to File Saving here, and you'll get this query, do you want to download the text files? And right above it there is a question, do you want to override your zoomed in map with your flat map? Click no. What that would do, and you might have seen some of my other mods where basically no matter how much you zoom in, you're going to see your flat map. It's kind of fun sometimes with some of those stranger flat maps that we create, but here we're trying to just get a regular experience of the game, not mess with the shaders at all to get that flat map fill. So we're going to click no and click download text files. Now, assuming that you have your replacer set where it needs to be, you have your browser set to download to your replacers, once you click download text files, you will see a lot of, and assuming that you have multiple file downloads allowed on your browser settings, you will see a lot of text files download. Don't be alarmed. These are all just generating right there in your browser. Nothing downloaded from the internet or from any external source. These are all files that are generated locally, saved locally, all of your text files. And once all of your text files have saved, you'll see this menu. It'll allow you to click a button to download all the image files. You get a warning, don't move away until your height map is downloaded. It may take some time, but the page will automatically redirect to further instructions when it's done. So I'm going to click download image files. And it won't show up here necessarily, the video doesn't capture it, but it is now downloading one after another of the image files, and there are a lot. So it might take a moment, especially the higher the resolution you use, the higher the map size you use, you're going to see longer download times. But again, it doesn't take a terrible amount of time, but you do need to just be patient and make sure you wait until your height map is downloaded. There we go. Height map is downloaded. Everything is done. You get this message, woohoo, you're done with the browser-based work. Please see the tutorial. Hey, you're seeing it now here on the video. There's also this link to the Discord tutorial. But again, the browser-based work is done. We can close out the browser at this point, and you have all the files you need, and we'll start working after this in Gimp. Alright, so if you followed all the steps so far, if you've downloaded your text files, downloaded your image files, and if you set all your settings in your browser to download to the correct place, then your mod folder, within your mod folder there's a replacers folder, a folder named replacers. Click into it and you should see something like this, something over 80 files. I don't know what the number will be when you finally see this tutorial, but there are a lot of files. You'll see both text files and image files. The image files will have names that end in, a lot of them that end in mask. You'll see a height map, your provinces file, you'll see your rivers file, flat map. You'll see a lot of different text files. Again, if you followed the tutorial, if you did everything correctly, you did not encounter any errors, then you should see something like this. If you don't see this, then something has gone wrong along the way, or you've missed a step of the tutorial and you might have to start over. Now we're going to open up Gimp. Again, this is the image processing program that you downloaded at the beginning of the tutorial. When you open it up, it should look something like this. Mileage may vary depending on the version that you're currently using. But what we need to do is open up Filters, and within the Filters tab, you'll see Python foo, not script foo. Do not click on script foo. Click on Python foo, and then click Console. When you click on console, it'll bring up this screen, and we are going to need to get our Gimp post-processing script that we'll be able to use to post-process all of the images that we've downloaded. And to do that, we're going to go on over to GitHub to pull that up, and I will leave a link for that in the description below. Alright, so now we're going to open up GitHub, and I'm going to leave the link again in the description of the video below. But you're going to open up GitHub and go to our MapGen post-processor. The post-processor, the purpose of it is to take the map files that you've generated, and if there's a mismatch, say, between the resolution and the image size, it's going to give a Gaussian blur to the image to make sure that it still looks correct, that it doesn't look Minecraft blocky, right? But it's also going to move all of the files out of that replacers folder into the folder, the game file folders for the mod, so that you don't have to do that manually by hand. All of your files are going to be processed, all the images are going to be put in the right format, and they're going to be moved into the correct folders. All of the text files are going to be moved to the correct folders, like the history will be moved to the history folder. So that's the purpose of the Gimp process. It takes a little bit of time. It's a Python script. What we're going to do, we're going to just click in here, click Control-A, Control-C to copy, and now we're going to move back over to Gimp, and we're going to paste this into our Python console in Gimp. So here we are at the Python console in Gimp. We're going to take that script that we copied from the GitHub page. We're going to paste it into the console. And you don't have to look up here, but you can see it's just pasting that entire script over. And then at the bottom, there's this method called process folder, and it passes in the directory that you are using for your mod. There are two little placeholders here that you're going to have to fill in yourself. So there's your username and then your mod name. So you're going to change your username to whatever your username is in your file directory, so CK3 RPG. And then you're going to change your mod name to the name of your mod. Here you could do test mod is what I did. And then whenever you're done with that, you are just going to press enter, and that's going to start the Gimp post-processing script process. Now, I was just going to show separately the screenshot. You can see at the bottom of Gimp, as you're doing that post-processing script, you'll see this little status bar. It's going to keep moving from left to right, from left to right, from left to right. It's doing file after file after file. Again, there's over 80 files that it has to process. It's moving them. For the image files, it's doing certain manipulations to them. It might be applying that blur like we talked about earlier. So you just have to be patient as that runs through. You're going to see it keep working through all of those files, processing them. It'll open them, export them, open them, export them. Again, everything just has to be put in the right place. So just give it some time. At the end of the post-processing script, when all is done, within the console, the Python foo console, which we had open up there, you'll see a green message that says that everything is done. So here's the image of that message that you're going to see at the end. Your Gimp process is complete. Don't forget to complete the rest of the steps. So once all of the processing is done, you'll see this green message. That means you're done. At the same time, you might see that the status bar has just stopped. Generally, I think it's on the wetlands export that it's doing. That doesn't mean that it didn't finish. That's just what happens to the status bar once it's done with everything. It doesn't clear out at the end. It just keeps showing it. So again, once you see the green message, you are done. You don't have to do anything else related to Gimp. All of the Gimp processing is done, and don't worry about the status bar. So here we are in Steam. What we're going to want to do next is right-click on Crusader Kings 3, click on Properties, and once you click Properties, it'll bring up this. And when you're in here, you just change launch options. You add -map editor, no underscore, no different capitalization, just -map editor. And with that, you can close out this screen, and you'll be able to launch the game. And when you launch the game, it will launch in map editor mode. Next, you're going to want to open up Crusader Kings 3 launcher. When you get to the launcher, you're going to want to change your playset to add the mod that you've created. Here we have the test mod. It's whatever name you gave to the mod in the descriptor folder file. So here I see test mod, and I would just click that button right there. And once I click that button, that'll be added to your playset. I would recommend with the generator that you only use the generated mod, that you don't have anything else active in your playset, because you're not going to know what's causing problems. Again, this completely overhauls all of the map and everything else, so if you have other things in there, there's very likely to be conflicts. And then you can, once you've got all of your editing done, you can actually go back and add in mods and start to see, what can you use, or you can check on the Discord to see if other people have found compatibility with certain mods. Alright, so if you've stuck with me so far, you have made it to the map editor. When you open it up, it should look something like this. Do not be alarmed if the terrain looks weird like it does here. You don't see any of the mask being applied yet. Part of the reason for that, I think, as far as I can tell, is when you have a map where the sizes don't match what the template is, then it might come up like this initially. All we need to do here, we're going to go to height map resolution, and we're going to, that's this button right here. We're going to click repack height map, and click repack. Alright, and so that's going to repack the height map for us. And then once we're done with that, we're going to go back to the material brush tool, and we're just going to click the repack detail data textures up here at the top right. And when we're done with that, you can click save as. You might want to go ahead and select, deselect all, and just take off user settings. You can check here by clicking these boxes on the right to make sure that it's saving by default to the correct place. I know that it is, so I'm not going to go through all that, but again, you're going to want all of these items to be saved. You press OK. And that's going to save, and when that's done saving, you are done with the map editor stage, you are done with the map generator stage. All that you have left at that point is to close out the map editor, to load up the game, and you should have a generated map, generated world in game. To close out the map editor, if you're not in windowed mode, you might have to click your Windows button or somehow click in to be able to right click from the taskbar to close it out. If you're in windowed mode, then you can just press the X button at the top right. Once you press the X button, it might ask you whether you want to save any unsaved changes. You can just say no because you've already saved everything. There is a little bit of a bug with the map editor that the exit button out here or Control F12 doesn't actually work. So I wouldn't suggest that. You're just going to have to hard close it. So here we've opened Crusader Kings 3 back up. We have in the Steam properties, we have set it map editor off. We've just deleted that, and we've opened Crusader Kings 3 by itself, just the game. We're going to click New Game. When we click New Game, you're going to see, it might not be a white screen in the future, you'll probably see your flat map displayed here, but you can just click down on the left, bottom left, you'll see Play as any ruler in 524. And when you click into that, you'll see the ruler select screen come up, and it should be, if all went according to plan, it should be the map that you generated. And here we go. There is the map that I generated. We zoom in here. We can see that we can click in to select any of the kingdoms, counties. Here I've done a kingdom only map or a kingdom level map at a tribal level. And we'll press start. Go to view players, and we have our map. Go to terrain, should be able to zoom out, see under the terrain map mode, our generated world. And there you go, you have generated a map with the Crusader Kings 3 Procedural Map Generator. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on the Discord. I have an active Discord community there, and welcome any questions there. We have a tool help channel. If you have any suggestions for improvements, happy again to take those. Thank you for following the tutorial, and if you need any